The snow fell in relentless sheets, blanketing the mountain landscape in an icy silence. Somewhere amidst this frozen wilderness, a lone figure trudged through the knee-deep drifts, her breath visible as fleeting wisps that vanished into the frigid air. She was not human, though she looked close enough to pass for one at first glance. Her skin shimmered faintly under the pale moonlight, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly hue, shifting colors like liquid starlight. She was lost, disoriented, and utterly alone. Her name, if it could be called such, was unpronounceable by any earthly tongue. It was more of a vibration, a resonance felt rather than heard. To herself, she thought simply of I or me, concepts she had begun to grasp during her time stranded on this alien world. Hunger clawed at her stomach. She hadn't eaten properly in days, weeks perhaps. Her advanced physiology allowed her to endure far longer without sustenance than any human ever could, but even she had limits. The cold gnawed at her bones, seeping deeper with every passing moment. She stumbled forward, her boots crunching against the hard-packed snow. Her once pristine hunting gear hung tattered around her frame, shredded from battles fought long ago. A spear-like weapon lay strapped across her back, its sleek design hinting at technology far beyond Earth's comprehension, but it was useless now, drained of energy after countless failed attempts to activate its power core. She cursed silently, though no sound escaped her lips. Cursing required words, and she barely remembered how they worked anymore. Everything had gone wrong so quickly. One moment, she'd been tracking prey across the vast plains of her home planet, a creature both cunning and dangerous, worthy of her skills as a huntress. Then came the blinding flash of light, the deafening roar of tearing spacetime, and suddenly she was here, wherever here was. At first, she'd assumed some kind of malfunction with her cloaking device, but hours turned into days, and still, there was no sign of rescue. No comrades arrived, no ships descended from the heavens. Just endless forests, towering mountains, and skies filled with unfamiliar constellations. As night fell earlier each day, the temperature plummeted further, and survival became her sole focus. Hunting proved nearly impossible. The animals here were small, skittish things compared to what she was used to, and their flesh tasted strange, almost repulsive. She tried scavenging berries and roots, but many made her ill. Even worse, the weather grew increasingly unpredictable. Storms rolled in without warning, burying everything beneath layers of ice and snow. Shelter became a luxury she couldn't afford to ignore. Tonight was especially brutal. The wind howled like a wounded beast, battering her already fragile resolve. Every step felt heavier than the last, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. She collapsed onto her knees, gasping for air that burned her lungs. For a brief, terrifying moment, she wondered if this would be where her journey ended, not in glorious combat, nor surrounded by allies, but huddled in the dirt, defeated by something as mundane as hunger and exposure. But then she saw it, a flicker of orange light dancing faintly in the distance. Hope surged within her chest, weak yet undeniable. Dragging herself upright, she staggered toward the glow, each movement fueled by sheer willpower. As she drew closer, the outline of a structure emerged, a modest wooden hut nestled against the base of the mountain. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, promising warmth and safety. Tears welled up in her glowing eyes, though whether from relief or exhaustion, she couldn't tell. Reaching the door, she hesitated. What if whoever lived inside wasn't friendly? Humans were unpredictable creatures, often driven by fear or greed. But desperation outweighed caution. With trembling hands, she knocked 3 times, the sound muffled by the raging storm outside. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing a man wrapped in thick furs. His face was lined with age and hardship, but his eyes held kindness. He stared at her for a moment, clearly startled by her appearance, before stepping aside and gesturing for her to enter. The warmth hit her like a wave, chasing away the biting chill that had clung to her skin for what felt like forever. She stepped inside cautiously, taking in the rustic simplicity of the hut. A small fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across rough-hewn walls adorned with tools and dried herbs. The scent of wood smoke mingled with something savory cooking over the flames, a smell that made her mouth water despite herself. The man closed the door behind her, bolting it securely against the storm. "You must be freezing," he said gruffly, his voice tinged with concern. Though his tone carried a hint of uncertainty, Likely due to her unusual appearance, he didn't seem afraid. Instead, he moved purposefully toward a corner of the room where blankets were stacked neatly. Grabbing one, he draped it over her shoulders, careful not to touch her glowing skin directly. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to a stool near the fire. She obeyed, sinking down gratefully. Her body trembled violently, partly from the lingering cold and partly from sheer relief. Words failed her again, leaving her unable to express gratitude, or explain who, or what, she was. Still, the man seemed content to let silence fill the space between them. He returned to the pot simmering above the flames, stirring its contents with practiced ease. After a few moments, he ladled some of the stew into a wooden bowl and handed it to her along with a spoon carved from bone. She accepted it hesitantly, unsure how to respond. Food was scarce in these parts, and offering it to a stranger, even one who looked as desperate as she did, took a level of generosity she hadn't anticipated. She met his gaze briefly, trying to convey her thanks through her luminous eyes. He nodded once, understanding passing silently between them. The first taste of the stew brought tears to her eyes, not because it was bad, but because it was good. The flavors were simple yet rich, chunks of venison, root vegetables, and herbs she didn't recognize blended together perfectly. Each bite revived her a little more, banishing the hollow ache in her stomach. She ate slowly, savoring every morsel, while the man busied himself adding more logs to the fire. When she finished, she set the empty bowl aside and wrapped the blanket tighter around herself, feeling human warmth begin to replace the icy numbness. For a while, neither spoke. The only sounds were the crackling fire and the distant howl of the wind outside. Finally, the man broke the silence. "You're not from around here, are you?" His question was gentle, probing but not accusatory. She shook her head, unsure how much he'd understand even if she could form coherent sentences. Seeing her hesitation, he chuckled softly. "Don't worry about explaining. I've seen enough in my years to know when someone's different." His words surprised her. Different. Yes, that was true, but hearing him acknowledge it so casually unsettled her in ways she couldn't articulate. Most humans she'd encountered, few as they were, reacted with fear or hostility upon realizing she wasn't one of them. This man, however, treated her presence as nothing more than a curiosity. Perhaps it was ignorance, or perhaps it was wisdom born from solitude. Either way, it gave her a sense of security she hadn't felt since arriving on this planet. As the hours passed, she began to relax, lulled by the steady rhythm of the fire and the comforting weight of the blanket. The man tended to various tasks around the hut, occasionally glancing her way to ensure she was all right. Despite his rugged exterior, there was a quiet gentleness about him that reminded her of hunters from her own world, those who respected the balance of life and death, never taking more than they needed. It was a quality she hadn't expected to find among humans. Eventually, fatigue claimed her. The combination of food, warmth, and safety proved too much for her weary body to resist. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she slumped slightly on the stool. Sensing her exhaustion, the man approached and guided her to a makeshift bed in the corner of the room. It consisted of straw-filled mattresses and additional blankets, crude but comfortable. She wanted to protest, to insist she didn't deserve such hospitality, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she allowed him to settle her in, murmuring vague sounds of gratitude before drifting off into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the cracks in the wooden walls, bathing the room in golden hues. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine layer of snow that sparkled like diamonds under the morning sun. For a moment, she forgot where she was, her mind clouded by remnants of sleep. Then memory rushed back, the cold, the hunger, the man who had taken her in, and she sat up abruptly, scanning the room. He wasn't there. Panic fluttered in her chest before she spotted a note pinned to the table beside the bed. Written in shaky handwriting, it read, "Gone to check traps. Stay warm. Don't wander far." Relief washed over her, though curiosity quickly took its place. Check traps? Did he mean hunting traps? She rose cautiously, stretching stiff muscles, and wandered to the window. Outside, the world looked transformed, calm, serene, almost peaceful. Yet she knew better than to trust appearances. Survival demanded vigilance, even in moments of apparent tranquility. Deciding to explore the hut further, she examined the shelves lining the walls. They were stocked with jars of preserved food, bundles of dried herbs, and various tools she recognized as essential for living off the land. A bow and quiver of arrows hung nearby, their craftsmanship crude but functional. Beside them rested a knife sharpened to a lethal edge, its blade gleaming faintly in the light. These items told a story of self-reliance, of someone accustomed to fending for themselves in harsh conditions. She admired the ingenuity, recognizing parallels to her own survival instincts. Her attention shifted to the fire, which had dwindled to embers overnight. Without thinking, she knelt beside it and began rebuilding the flames using techniques she'd observed the previous evening. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small way to repay the man's kindness. As the fire roared back to life, she noticed a kettle hanging above it. Inside, melted snow awaited boiling, presumably for drinking water. She filled a cup and sipped cautiously, marveling at how refreshing it tasted despite its simplicity. Time passed slowly, marked only by the shifting angle of sunlight through the windows. She occupied herself by tidying the space, rearranging items she'd disturbed during her exploration. It was a futile exercise, given the hut's already orderly state, but it kept her mind occupied. Eventually, restlessness set in. The urge to move, to act, grew stronger with each passing minute. Her hunter's instincts whispered warnings, stay put, conserve energy, but her body yearned for activity. Just as she debated stepping outside, the door opened, and the man returned. He carried a bundle of pelts slung over one shoulder and a sack presumably filled with game. Snow dusted his boots and fur-lined coat, evidence of his trek through the fresh powder. Spotting her standing by the fire, he smiled faintly. "Thought you might try wandering off," he said, setting his load down. "Good thing you didn't. The woods can be treacherous after a storm." She inclined her head, acknowledging his words. Though she understood little of his language, his tone conveyed clear meaning. Danger lurked beyond the safety of the hut, and venturing out unprepared would be foolish. Still, the idea of remaining cooped up grated against her nature. Hunters thrived on movement, on pursuing goals rather than waiting idly. Patience was a skill she struggled to master, especially now when every fiber of her being screamed to reclaim control. Seeing her agitation, the man gestured toward the pile of pelts. "Help me sort these," he asked, mimicking actions to clarify his request. Grateful for the distraction, she joined him, separating usable hides from damaged ones. Working alongside him provided a sense of purpose, however minor, and allowed her to observe his methods closely. He handled the materials with care, ensuring none went to waste. Again, she noted the respect he showed for the resources at hand, a philosophy shared by her people. Their collaboration continued throughout the afternoon, punctuated by occasional pauses for tea or snacks. Communication remained limited, relying heavily on gestures and facial expressions, yet it didn't feel strained. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a mutual recognition of shared struggles. By evening, they had cleaned and stored all the pelts, leaving the hut smelling faintly of leather and earth. As darkness fell, the man lit another fire, creating a cozy ambience that contrasted sharply with the biting cold outside. He offered her more stew, which she accepted eagerly. Eating together fostered a sense of camaraderie, bridging the gap between species and cultures. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt less alone, not fully integrated, but no longer entirely isolated either. Still, questions lingered in her mind. Who was this man, living so far removed from civilization? Why did he choose solitude over society? And most importantly, why had he helped her without question or expectation of reward? Humans were complex creatures, capable of great kindness and equally profound cruelty. Understanding them required patience and insight, qualities she hoped to cultivate during her stay. By the third day, a tentative routine had formed between them. Mornings began with chores, chopping wood, melting snow for water, preparing meals. Afternoons were spent repairing equipment or tending to the traps scattered throughout the surrounding forest. Though she initially struggled to adapt to his methods, her innate resourcefulness proved invaluable. Together, they worked efficiently, accomplishing tasks that would have taken twice as long alone. Despite their growing bond, Communication remained fragmented. Basic gestures sufficed for practical matters, but deeper conversations eluded them. Frustration bubbled beneath the surface, particularly for her. She longed to share her story, to explain where she came from and why she was here. Yet every attempt to vocalize thoughts resulted in garbled sounds, meaningless to both parties. The man, sensing her frustration, often reassured her with kind smiles and encouraging nods. His patience was remarkable, bordering on saintly. One afternoon, while mending a torn pelt, inspiration struck. She retrieved her depleted weapon from its resting place by the wall and presented it to him. Pointing to the inert power core, she mimed pressing buttons and twisting dials, hoping to convey its intended function. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by determination. Fetching his toolbox, he motioned for her to sit beside him. Hours passed as they experimented, testing theories and discarding failures. Progress was slow, but the process itself strengthened their connection. Through trial and error, they discovered that certain metals enhanced the device's conductivity, albeit minimally. While nowhere near operational, the weapon responded faintly to stimuli, an encouraging sign. Celebrating their minor victory, they toasted with cups of spiced tea, laughter echoing through the tiny hut. In that moment, barriers dissolved, replaced by shared joy and accomplishment. Yet amid the newfound harmony, doubt crept in. How long could this arrangement last? Winter showed no signs of relenting, trapping them in close quarters indefinitely. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, exacerbated by their inability to fully communicate. Misunderstandings arose frequently, though neither voiced complaints. Instead, they navigated challenges silently, trusting instinct over explanation. On the fourth evening, disaster struck. Returning from checking traps, the man slipped on an icy patch, injuring his leg badly. Pain etched lines across his face as he limped into the hut, leaning heavily on his staff. She rushed to assist, guiding him to the bed and fetching bandages. Cleaning and wrapping the wound proved challenging without proper medical supplies, but improvisation saved the day. Once settled, he grimaced, gesturing toward the fireplace. "Keep it going," he rasped, emphasizing the importance of maintaining heat. Fear gripped her heart. If he couldn't walk, feeding and caring for them both would fall solely on her shoulders. Already weakened by malnutrition and exposure, she doubted her ability to handle such responsibility alone. Still, duty compelled her to try. Over the next several days, she ventured outside cautiously, setting new traps and gathering firewood. Each trip tested her endurance, pushing her to physical limits she hadn't known existed. Back inside, she monitored the man's condition closely. Fever plagued him intermittently, forcing her to improvise remedies using herbs found in his stores. Prayers, silent and fervent, accompanied each application, begging whatever higher powers existed to spare him. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with restless tossing and muttered delirium. Exhaustion weighed heavily on both, yet neither surrendered completely. During lucid moments, the man reassured her with weak smiles and hoarse whispers. "We'll get through this," he insisted, though conviction wavered. Doubt gnawed at her resolve, whispering insidious doubts about survival prospects. Would help arrive in time? Or would they succumb to winter's relentless grip? Then, on the seventh night, something extraordinary happened. As she tended to the fire, keeping flames alive against encroaching darkness, the weapon emitted a soft hum. Startled, she dropped the poker and scrambled to examine it. Its surface shimmered faintly, responding to ambient energy generated by the fire. Heart pounding, she adjusted settings based on memory, coaxing it to life incrementally. Light pulsed steadily, illuminating the room with ethereal brilliance. Realization dawned. Somehow, the repairs had reactivated dormant systems, awakening latent capabilities. Testing cautiously, she aimed at a log and triggered a low-powered burst. Sparks flew, igniting tinder instantly. Success flooded her veins, adrenaline surging alongside disbelief. Turning to the man, she demonstrated again, pointing emphatically to indicate potential applications. His eyes widened, comprehension dawning alongside awe. Though injured, he rallied momentarily, urging her to continue experimenting. Together, they refined techniques, learning to harness restored functionality effectively. Each success bolstered confidence, reigniting hope extinguished by recent trials. Perhaps salvation lay within reach after all. Days blurred into weeks as recovery progressed haltingly. With renewed purpose, she pushed boundaries, teaching herself tricks gleaned from observation. Firewood chopped faster, meals prepared quicker, all thanks to technological aid unavailable mere days prior. Meanwhile, the man regained strength gradually, assisted by diligent care and determined rehabilitation efforts. Yet change wrought complications unforeseen. Dependency shifted subtly, tilting dynamics unexpectedly. Where once equality balanced partnership, imbalance now threatened equilibrium. Pride clashed with gratitude, creating friction neither anticipated. Conversations, previously harmonious despite limitations, became fraught with tension. Silence grew frequent, punctuated by terse exchanges masking deeper frustrations. Conflict reached a tipping point one frosty morning. Task allocation sparked disagreement, escalating rapidly into heated argument. Gestures flew wildly, voices raised in futile attempts to bridge gaps widening exponentially. Emotions boiled over, culminating in slammed doors and stony silences lasting hours. Isolation loomed large, casting shadows darker than any winter storm. Amidst turmoil, clarity emerged reluctantly. Realization struck simultaneously, dependence bound them irrevocably, intertwining destinies regardless of strife. Separation equaled vulnerability. Unity ensured survival. Slowly, tentatively, reconciliation unfolded. Apologies exchanged wordlessly, conveyed through hesitant touches and contrite expressions. Forgiveness flowed naturally, paving paths toward resolution. Understanding deepened, fostering empathy previously lacking. Perspectives broadened, embracing nuances overlooked amidst chaos. Cooperation resumed cautiously, infused with newfound appreciation for sacrifices endured. Bonds strengthened, tempered by adversity faced collectively. Trust rebuilt brick by painstaking brick, forming foundations solidified by shared hardship. Spring arrived hesitantly, teasing thaw with sporadic bursts of warmth. Snow receded gradually, revealing landscapes transformed by seasonal transition. Streams swelled with runoff, cascading melodiously over rocky beds. Birds returned en masse, filling skies with vibrant plumage and cheerful melodies. Life stirred visibly, signaling renewal promised annually. Within the hut, anticipation mingled with apprehension. Change loomed imminent, heralding possibilities uncertain yet inevitable. Plans formulated quietly, discussed via gestures supplemented sparingly with borrowed phrases. Decisions weighed heavily, influenced by realities stark yet unavoidable. Departure beckoned insistently, propelled by necessity overriding comfort cultivated painstakingly. Preparations commenced methodically, inventorying supplies stockpiled meticulously. Packs assembled, prioritizing essentials over luxuries accumulated inadvertently. Tools sharpened, clothing patched, provisions rationed conservatively. Each action underscored finality looming ominously, casting pallor over interactions otherwise light-hearted. Farewells lingered unspoken, suspended precariously awaiting opportune moments elusive thus far. Yet amidst pragmatism, sentimentality surfaced unexpectedly. Tokens exchanged discreetly, imbued with significance profound yet personal. Necklaces crafted crudely, bracelets woven delicately, symbols tangible representing intangibles cherished deeply. Affection manifested indirectly, expressed via acts subtle yet meaningful. Gratitude conveyed silently, acknowledged reciprocally through gestures tender yet sincere. Departure date approached inexorably, dictated by calendars imposed externally. Final checks completed obsessively, ensuring readiness optimal despite circumstances challenging persistently. Dawn broke brilliantly, illuminating horizons beckoning tantalizingly. Backpacks strapped securely, boots laced tightly, resolve fortified resolutely. Threshold crossed decisively, pausing momentarily to absorb ambience indelibly imprinted memories everlasting. Journey commenced deliberately, traversing terrain familiar yet altered perceptibly. Pathways forged previously guided steps confidently, bolstered by experiences accrued indispensably. Companionship accompanied implicitly, supporting endeavors undertaken collaboratively. Challenges confronted bravely, surmounted triumphantly owing camaraderie cultivated resiliently. Distance expanded incrementally, measured footsteps accumulating progressively. Landmarks passed swiftly, milestones achieved sequentially. Progress tracked meticulously, gauging advancements qualitatively quantifiably. Stamina tested rigorously, endurance proven conclusively. Strength drawn mutually, fortitude reinforced reciprocally. Communication evolved organically, transcending barriers formerly insurmountable. Vocabulary expanded gradually, incorporating terms adopted intuitively. Sentences constructed haltingly, articulated patiently. Conversations engaged enthusiastically, stimulated intellectually emotionally. Connection deepened substantively, enriched experientially empathetically. Encounters diversified unpredictably, introducing variables uncontrollable inherently. Wild animals observed warily, predators avoided strategically. Weather fluctuated capriciously, storms endured stoically. Terrain varied dramatically, obstacles navigated ingeniously. Adaptability honed proficiently, resilience demonstrated consistently. Reflection occurred spontaneously, prompted introspectively retrospectively. Growth recognized appreciatively, achievements celebrated modestly proudly. Lessons learned assimilated thoroughly, wisdom applied judiciously wisely. Transformation acknowledged humbly, evolution embraced optimistically hopefully. Future envisioned ambitiously, aspirations pursued tenaciously passionately. Goals defined clearly, objectives pursued diligently relentlessly. Ambitions fueled motivationally, determination sustained unwaveringly steadfastly. Destiny shaped proactively, fate influenced intentionally purposefully. Partnership reaffirmed continually, commitment renewed devotedly loyally. Trust validated repeatedly, loyalty rewarded reciprocally generously. Friendship solidified permanently, bonds strengthened impermeably unbreakably. Love blossomed naturally, affection nurtured tenderly compassionately. Adventure continued indefinitely, chapters unfolding sequentially concurrently. Stories written collectively, narratives interwoven intricately seamlessly. Legacies created collaboratively, histories documented comprehensively inclusively. Impact measured significantly, contributions valued profoundly meaningfully. As they ventured further from the mountain hut, the landscape began to shift. The snow gave way to patches of green, and the biting cold softened into a crisp, refreshing breeze. Spring was taking hold, breathing life back into the world around them. Yet with each step forward, a sense of unease lingered between them. They had grown so close in their shared struggle, but now they were stepping into the unknown, into a future that neither could fully predict. The alien huntress glanced at the man walking beside her, his limp barely noticeable anymore thanks to weeks of recovery. She marveled at how far they'd come together. When she first stumbled upon his hut, she had been broken, starving, freezing, and utterly alone. Now, not only did she feel physically stronger, but she also carried something deeper, hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as lost as she once thought. Her weapon hummed softly against her back, a constant reminder of what they had achieved together. It wasn't fully restored, it still lacked the power to open portals or summon ships, but it worked well enough for basic tasks. More importantly, its reactivation symbolized more than technological progress. It represented resilience, ingenuity, and trust. Without the man's help, she doubted she would have ever coaxed even a flicker of energy from the device. For his part, the man seemed equally reflective. His eyes scanned the horizon, lingering on distant peaks and valleys. He had spent decades living in solitude, content with his simple existence among the mountains. But now, everything felt different. The quiet rhythm of his solitary life had been disrupted, not by chaos, but by connection. This strange woman from another world had become an integral part of his days, forcing him to adapt, to learn, and ultimately, to grow. They stopped for a rest near a bubbling stream, its clear waters reflecting the pale blue sky above. The huntress knelt by the edge, cupping her hands to drink. The cool liquid revived her parched throat, and she sighed in relief. Beside her, the man unpacked some dried meat and offered her a piece. She accepted it with a grateful nod, chewing slowly as she watched the water ripple over smooth stones. "I've been thinking," he said suddenly, breaking the peaceful silence. His voice startled her, though not unpleasantly. "If you're looking for a way home, I might know someone who can help." Her glowing eyes widened in surprise. "Someone," she echoed, stumbling over the unfamiliar syllables. Her attempts at speaking his language were improving, but words still came haltingly. He nodded. "A trader. Comes through these parts every few months. Swaps goods with hunters like me. He knows things, sees places most folks don't. If anyone can point you in the right direction, it's him." She tilted her head, considering this revelation. A trader? Could such a person truly possess knowledge of other worlds? Or was this merely wishful thinking? Still, the possibility ignited a spark within her chest. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she allowed herself to believe that returning home might not be impossible after all. "Where?" she asked, pointing vaguely toward the horizon. The man chuckled softly. "Not far. Couple days walk east. There's a village there where he usually sets up shop. We'll find him if we hurry." Her heart raced. A village meant people, lots of people. Humans who might react to her presence with fear or hostility. The thought made her uneasy, but she pushed the worry aside. If this trader held even a sliver of hope for her return, she had to take the risk. They resumed their journey, moving steadily through forests and meadows bathed in spring sunlight. Along the way, the man taught her phrases in his language, patiently correcting her pronunciation when she faltered. In return, she tried to explain bits of her own culture using gestures and crude drawings in the dirt. Their exchanges were clumsy but heartfelt, bridging gaps that seemed insurmountable just weeks before. By the third day, they reached the outskirts of the village. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the air carried the scent of baking bread and roasting meat. Children played in the streets, laughing and chasing one another while adults went about their daily chores. It was a scene so ordinary, yet profoundly foreign to the Huntress. She hesitated at the tree line, gripping her spear tightly. "You'll be fine," the man assured her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stick close to me. No one will bother you." Taking a deep breath, she nodded and stepped out into the open. Heads turned as they entered the village, curious gazes following their every move. Whispers rippled through the crowd, some wary, others intrigued. The man ignored the murmurs, leading her confidently toward a colorful tent pitched near the center of town. Inside, the trader sat cross-legged on a pile of rugs, surrounded by shelves laden with exotic wares. Beads, trinkets, scrolls, and strange artifacts filled the space, each item hinting at stories untold. The man called out a greeting, drawing the trader's attention. "Well, well," the trader said, his voice smooth and measured. "What brings you two to my humble abode?" The man explained their purpose, gesturing toward the Huntress and her weapon. The trader's expression shifted from casual interest to sharp curiosity. He leaned forward, studying her intently. "You're not from here," he stated plainly. She shook her head, then pointed upward, mimicking the motion of stars twinkling in the night sky. "Other place," she managed to say, her voice hesitant. The trader's eyes gleamed with understanding. "Ah, I see. And you're looking for a way back?" "Again," she nodded. "Yes." He stroked his chin thoughtfully, glancing at the weapon slung across her back. "That device of yours, it's damaged, isn't it? Not operating at full capacity." She frowned, surprised by his insight. "How, you know?" The trader smirked. "Let's just say I've dealt with travelers before. Your kind aren't the first to pass through these lands." Her heart leapt. Travelers? Others like her? Could it be true? "What do you want in exchange?" the man interjected, his tone cautious. He knew better than to trust too easily. The trader shrugged. "Information comes at a price. Goods, gold, favors, I'm flexible. But helping someone like her—" He paused, eyeing the Huntress thoughtfully. "This is no small matter. I'll need something valuable." The man reached into his pack and pulled out a bundle of pelts, laying them on the ground. "Will this do?" The trader inspected the furs, nodding approvingly. A good start. But I'll also need details. Where exactly are you trying to go? What kind of ship brought you here? The questions came rapid fire, overwhelming her. She struggled to answer, frustration mounting as her limited vocabulary failed her. Sensing her distress, the man stepped in, describing what little they knew about her arrival. After several tense minutes, the trader leaned back, tapping his fingers against his knee. I may know someone who can help. A scientist, a tinkerer of sorts. Lives farther north, near the coast. If anyone can repair your device, it's him. Relief washed over the Huntress, though tempered by caution. Another journey awaited, fraught with uncertainty. Still, it was a chance, a real chance, to find her way home. Thank you, she whispered, bowing slightly. The trader waved off her gratitude, already distracted by the pelts and the promise of profit. As they left the tent, the man turned to her. Ready for the next leg? She smiled faintly, determination hardening her features. Yes. Days turned into weeks as they trekked northward, following the trader's directions. The terrain grew rougher, the air saltier as they neared the ocean. Finally, they arrived at a sprawling estate perched atop a cliff overlooking the sea. Strange contraptions dotted the grounds, whirring and clicking as if alive. Inside, the scientist greeted them with wide-eyed excitement, eager to examine the Huntress's weapon. Weeks passed as repairs progressed. The scientist worked tirelessly, consulting ancient texts and conducting experiments late into the night. Through it all, the man remained by her side, offering support and encouragement. Their bond deepened, transcending language barriers and cultural differences. By the time the weapon was finally operational, she realized she faced a choice, not just about leaving, but about staying. On the eve of her departure, she stood with the man on the cliffs, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The portal shimmered faintly behind them, ready to whisk her away. You don't have to go, he said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. You could stay. Start a new life here, with me. Tears welled in her glowing eyes. She wanted to say yes, to abandon her old life and embrace this new one. But duty called. Her people needed her. She couldn't turn her back on them, not yet. I must, she replied, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. But I will return, one day. He nodded, accepting her decision without resentment. Stepping closer, he pressed something into her hand, a small wooden carving of a bird in flight. So you won't forget. She clutched it tightly, memorizing the feel of it against her palm. Then, without another word, she stepped through the portal, disappearing in a flash of light. Back on her home planet, amidst familiar sights and sounds, she found solace in knowing she had changed. The human man had shown her kindness, courage, and love, all qualities she vowed to carry forward. And though galaxies separated them, she held on to the belief that their paths would cross again. Because sometimes, even in the vastness of the universe, connections forged in adversity prove unbreakable.